Our common goal should be very clear. We need to turbocharge our defense industrial capacity in the next 5 years. And at the heart of this must be one simple principle. Europe must spend more, Europe must spend better, and this will help us fill the urgent need to rebuild, replenish, and modernize member states' armed forces. And my friends, the EPP is the party that has championed a Europe that can defend itself. And we will be the party that delivers on a defense union. And this topic needs undivided attention. And therefore, we need a designated defense commissioner for the next mandate. And this is not only a war unleashed by Russia against Ukraine. This is also a war on our energy. It's a war on our economy. It's a war on our values. It is a war on our future. It is about autocracy against democracy. And I stand here with the conviction that with the necessary courage and with the necessary solidarity, Putin will fail and Ukraine and Europe will prevail. Let's fight for Europe. Long live Europe. Thank you.
Und wenn die jüdischen Zeitungen heute glauben, auf versteckte Drohungen und die nationalsozialistische Bewegung einschüchtern zu können, sie sollen sich hüten. Einmal wird unsere Geduld zu Ende sein und dann wird den Juden das freche Lügenmaul gestopft werden.
Joseph Goebbels' Jew hatred is not as simple as what is commonly told about the Nazis to the people today, and this same hatred, propaganda and incitement to war can be seen in Europe, for which thanks go to this new propaganda minister of Germany and the new supporter of the Nazi ideology without a balls, Ursula von der Leyen, who based on her last name, seems to be a pure white Aryan race and true Nazi, secretly of course, and even she has learned how to smile, unlike his predecessor, and this does not fool me, who has solved the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. from 60 years ago, who was not shot by James Earl Ray but Memphis police detective Edward Reddit from the bathroom window of the Bessie Brewer's Hotel. Joseph Goebbels' hatred of Jews has been more than just something he can target. This hatred because he has not been able to say outright that Germany is getting rid of all its citizens who are not useful to the state, where they are driven to death of starvation in the streets and sent to Auschwitz to be exterminated by the laws that the Nazis enacted with the help of the people's hatred, which has served as justification for this mass murder, some of whom were forced into Joseph Mengel's illegal medical examinations in the name of race theory. The same thing can be seen in Finland, and how the most insane president in the history of Finland who ever lived, and the next one after Nazi Hitler, the White King of the Coalition, and little bit Waco Sawley, the two-faced Niinisto, who has built Finland into a Nazi state, which has these similar laws in place to subjugate problem citizens into illegal medical brain research of Walter Major Helena, a researcher from Turku University who used these human rats of medicine to fuel her academic career. With the help of these medically non-existent and imaginary diseases, on top of which Finland has enacted these forced treatment laws of mental health. These diseases are just arbitrary interpretations of the patient by doctors loyal to the ideology of the coalition, such as Kari Ohala, which are done only because these citizens can be subjected to human rats for medical brain research that Elon Musk can use on the side of the United States when he develops these brain chips.
Elon Musk's brain implant startup Neuralink revealing it hit a setback just a few weeks after inserting a chip in its first human patient. The company says some of the chip's connective threads retracted unexpectedly from the patient's brain, which affected the device. It's Neuralink ambitions to use these implants to allow humans to operate computers using their thoughts. Claire Duffy joins us now. Claire, in the initial few weeks we saw and heard of great success in the initial phases of this. Do we know what caused these threads to become detached and whether or not it's been resolved?
Yeah, Julia, I mean, as with many of these things surrounding Neuralink, the details here are fairly sparse. We don't know how or why these threads disconnected. These chips are implanted in the part of the brain that controls the intention to move. So in the weeks after this initial surgery, which happened in January, we saw even a video of this first human trial subject, Nolan Arbaugh, who has been quadriplegic since 2016. We saw a video of him controlling a computer mouse, playing chess on a computer with his brain. So pretty remarkable stuff. We don't know just how significant of a setback this is. And again, we don't know how or why exactly this happened, although the company did say that it was able to increase the performance of this device in order to make it work a little better after these threads retracted. It's not clear whether they're going to be able to go in and fix this problem entirely, but they did say that it had affected the data processing speeds and ultimately the effectiveness of this device. Now, obviously, this is not an ideal situation for this first human trial subject, although this is still a test. And the company had said that the whole point of this human trial was to study the effectiveness of this device. So hopefully they are getting some information, some data about this that potentially they can fix in the future, because Neuralink has said that it's looking to enroll more human trial subjects this year and into the coming years, Julia.
Im Übrigen können unsere Parteigenossen des Männer auch darüber beruhigt sein, dass eher als wir alle denken, die Stunde des Endes des roten Terrors gekommen sein wird. Und wir werden den Herren und Karl Liebknecht aus Wald Töne beibringen, die sie noch niemals vernommen haben.
Do you notice how Joseph Goebbels blames Russia for the Red Terror? And even though I have not a history scholar, how could this Russian influence come inside the Germany's borders? This activity has had no other purpose than to create war positivity in the people and incite them to participate in this world conquest made by Hitler and his friends. And this same bottomless nonsense is proclaimed by the German new propaganda minister and Joseph Goebbels' reawakened version without a balls, Ursula von der Leyen from the European Commission, and secretly Nazi who wears the colors of war, which in this era is blue-yellow.
Putin is responsible. He is responsible for the death of Alexei Navalny.
Ursula von der Leyen accusing Mr. Putin of Navalny's death is certainly as big a lie as the Nord Stream gas pipeline explosions, where European countries blamed Mr. Putin for this action even though Mr. Putin has no motive to blow up his own gas pipelines. These accusations against Mr. Putin in the European propaganda media, such as the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko, are more of a manipulation of the European people, the purpose of which is to make them believe that Mr. Putin is a monster dictator, even though this is not true. And if I, as a criminal investigator, I believe something what our president has said, then former Finnish President Tarja Halonen's statement about Mr. Putin, where he said that Mr. Putin is a much better leader than many Westerners, which is certainly true because he does not have this Western democracy behind which the state's decision makers can bury all their own crimes and finally blame the people on them, which has become the main mantra here in Finland because the people have chosen their decision makers. Just like SDP's hyena and Finland's former child Prime Minister Sanna Marin did almost repeatedly in the media, if she didn't directly say this, then at least acted like it. In all her arrogance in connection of Uniper losses and enacting nurse-sizing laws which now closes the elder care homes together with the self-inflicted labor shortage of the private giants of medical care, the largest of which is led by the best friend of the White King of the coalition and little bit Waco Sawley the two-faced Niinisto, who is just as crazy about financial margins than his friend Mikael Liljas from Mihilainen. These cases that the propaganda media of the Western countries blurt out to the public about Mr. Putin have not my stamp of approval on them, which means in these cases that Mr. Putin is not guilty of anything he is accused in these Western media fake news. But these cases such as the Nord Stream gas pipeline explosions and shooting down of Malaysian Flight 17 are committed by a group operating in a Western state, who enjoy the protection of the highest leadership of the state, and these cases are done only to increase the anger of the people, just like with the massacre of Anders Behring Breivik in Utøya, which in all its complexity with the bombings has been so complicated in terms of its construction what Breivik's education do not even support, and with the timing of this bombing, it is more likely that Breivik did not act alone, but he has worked about 10 to 15 people group that machinated this massacre, and which the blame goes only to Breivik and the rest of this group. Members can go to home with their families to watch this massacre in the television. Cultivating this national hatred on this new minority group, i.e. people suffering from mental health problems, can be seen in the case of Germanwings pilot Andreas Lubitz, who was driven to self-destruction by feeding him drugs in the name of these medically non-existent and imaginary diseases that is used for cancer treatment, and which as a medicines destroys your immune and nervous system and also lower your brain function, which makes you very impulsive to any kind of distress, which is of course good, if the plan is to make these patients to do suicide, just like Lubitz did. Medical care psychiatry, its activities and working methods with these patients is the only reason to this Germanwings accident, and Lubitz is nothing more than a victim of highly planned teamwork of psychiatry, which purpose is nothing more than to make its patients to do these shocking acts, with the outcome where all the reason goes to these victims of psychiatry and psychiatry itself with its working methods, which is a better version of Nazi propaganda against Jews, and who get away from this like a chicken from a cage. With the help of this plane accident of Lubitz, German decision makers have bought the maximum amount of hatred of the people among these mental health patients, with which they can now do whatever they want, because this hatred and why the state mental wards in Finland is full of these problematic citizens provoked to action, which gives the Finnish authorities right to condemn these citizens to mental ward based on imaginary diseases with the help of this hatred against these victims of psychiatry, to serve university-level researchers as they human rats of medicine. With the help of these drugs that were fed to Lubitz, family mothers in Finland have been made to drown even their own children in bathtubs. This shows what this medical psychiatry and state decision makers are ready to do for the creation of this new minority group, which the agencies of democratic states, such as medical care psychiatry, are allowed to subject to their own illegal medical brain examinations in the name of these imaginary diseases, which has no medical certificate of any kind. But it is done entirely on the basis of the doctor's imagination when he interprets the behavior of the patient who is drugged with drugs that decrease brain functions and, if necessary, are provoked into actions like Yliviuska church arsonist Jouni Kaupila, who burned the church only because of multiple wrong decisions towards him, where this church burn was nothing more than a revenge against these Finnish authorities whose interpretations of the law is like a Nazi Germany and the medieval church, against which no living being can fight in Finland. And in front of these illegal actions, the European democratic states' free fake media blame Mr. Putin with these fake poisonings, like Alexander Litvinenko and Alexei Navalny, who has died in cancer, effectively draw the eyes of the European people to Mr. Putin, and no one talks about what the authorities of these democratic states are doing with these 21st century Jews who are being subjugated into these illegal human rats projects of medicine and be a part of the academic career of Walter Major Helena, a researcher at the University of Turku, and other university researchers who use these human rats for fuel their academic career. Litvinenko and Navalny, who have died in cancer like all the others whose deaths are promoted by the fake media as something other than cancer in connection with their deaths, such as English Amy Winehouse, Swedish Avicii, aka Tim Bergling, Danish Kim Wall and Finland's Jasmine Valtelainen. All these 6 people have died of 99% in cancer, but with their deaths have created a false image in the eyes of the people, which is core competence of the European fake media, which almost without exception means a lie about the reality of the cases, and which means that the war in Ukraine is 99% of lies and making people to believe in its lies. It shows the people some kind of random shooting in a field, as if one could say anything from these media images that it's a real war, or that the Russian occupation of Ukrainian territories with the help of military equipment. The war in Ukraine, which is a fake war created by the Western state fake media, with the help of the state's decision makers, can launder states' coffers into their own tax haven accounts, from which it can be distributed to their own club of friends without the approval of the people, and in order to suppress the survival of the disadvantaged in society, whose lives the Finnish government has set up a maximally complex bureaucracy on the side of the People's Pension Institution, the purpose of which is to drive them to bankruptcy and state mental hospitals with the help of this. Based on this as well, Navalny is part of this European propaganda, with the help of European democratic state makers spread their own propaganda in order to boost these lies and propaganda in their fake media against Mr. Putin. Democracy of Western countries, which is known only for its own lies and for subjugating problem citizens as human rats in medicine with the help of imaginary diseases, and for its money laundering business with the help of its own organizations such as the European Union and its numerous subsidiary organizations.
And it was breathtaking to see the courage of those who attended Navalny's funeral. Europe will stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes, with more financial support, more military support. Russia has destroyed houses, hospitals and kindergartens, but they could not destroy the dream of a free and prosperous Ukraine that takes its place at the heart of the European Union. And today, my friends, this dream lives on, also in Moldova, in Georgia and the Western Balkans. And together, we will turn this dream into reality. That is what EPP and that is what Europe stands for. When it comes to security, there's no more pressing issue than Ukraine. I was in Bucha after it was liberated. I will never forget the body bags lined up. Innocent civilians, young women, old men, killed by Putin's soldiers. And I will never forget the desperate parents whose children have been abducted by Russia. Their tears, their fears, their agony. And as a mother and grandmother, my heart is bleeding to hear these stories. Putin is responsible. He is responsible for the death of Alexei Navalny. And it was breathtaking to see the courage of those who attended Navalny's funeral. One of the brave women said, Navalny sacrificed himself to save the country. Putin sacrificed the country to save himself. Putin is wanted for war crimes, and he will face justice. And there is a courtroom in The Hague waiting for him, my friends. And it was breathtaking.
Democracy, which was also the background of Adolf Hitler's actions and which he had taken over, and why he executed so many people to clear them out of his way, so that the people could not vote for someone to replace Hitler. And this corruption is still the basis of democracy, and why Finland is really a one-party system that comes from the relationships of individuals through Ursula von der Leyen, whose actions in front of the people are almost identical to Joseph Goebbels and Hitler, if too much drama is left out.
This is an inspiring yet a tragic story about Sophie Scholl, born May 9, 1921, in Furstenberg, Germany. This young German student was a beacon of courage in a time when darkness loomed over the nation, cast by the menacing figure of Adolf Hitler and his Nazi regime. At the tender age of 21, Sophie faced her untimely demise, leaving behind a legacy of unwavering bravery and a lasting inspiration for generations to come. With her unyielding spirit and a heart brimming with justice, she stood tall, defying the tyrant himself. In the hallowed halls of the University of Munich, Sophie pursued knowledge with a passion matched by few. Yet, as she delved into the depths of academia, she discovered a truth that shook her to the core. The tendrils of Nazi propaganda slithered through the air, poisoning the minds of her fellow countrymen. But Sophie, with her sharp intellect and keen perception, saw through the veil of deceit. With her brother Hans by her side and a group of like-minded friends, in June of 1942, Sophie became part of White Rose resistance movement. Together, they would pen their dissenting thoughts on leaflets, determined to awaken the dormant conscience of their fellow Germans. In secret chambers and hidden corners, they poured their souls onto the pages, words blazing with the fire of truth. Under the cover of night, Sophie and Hans ventured into the heart of the city, their footsteps carrying them where others feared to tread. They scattered their leaflets like seeds of rebellion, sowing doubt in the minds of their countrymen. The words on those pages were a clarion call, urging the people to rise against the oppressive regime, to question the lies and propaganda that held them captive. But the hands of fate are fickle, and the tendrils of darkness can tighten their grip when least expected. On February 18, 1943, while distributing leaflets at their university, Sophie and Hans found themselves ensnared in the clutches of the Gestapo, Hitler's ruthless secret police. Interrogations followed, but Sophie remained resolute, her spirit unbroken. In a courtroom, Sophie stood before her accusers. The trial was a masquerade, a farce designed to break her spirit. But Sophie, with her unwavering determination, delivered impassioned speeches, her words ringing with truth and righteousness. How could they expect silence when evil thrived? How could they turn a blind eye to the suffering inflicted upon the innocent? Sophie believed it was their duty as humans to challenge injustice, to defy those who trampled upon their freedoms. Alas, the forces of darkness prevailed. Sophie and Hans, along with their comrade Christoph Probst, were condemned to death. On February 22, 1943, the guillotine awaited them, its cold embrace beckoning. But even in those final moments, Sophie's courage did not waver, for she knew that her sacrifice would forever etch her name in the annals of bravery and resistance. In her last breaths, Sophie uttered these words:
"How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there is hardly anyone willing to give himself up individually to a righteous cause? Such a fine sunny day and I have to go. But what does my death matter if through us, thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action?"
Today we remember Sophie Scholl, the iconic young student who defied Hitler and his Nazi regime. Her spirit lives on, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are those who will rise, who will challenge oppression, and who will fight for what is right. May her story inspire us all to be brave and to stand up against injustice no matter the cost.
And that is the most important topic on earth, peace. What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek?
Our common goal
Not a
should
Pax
be very
Americana,
clear. We need to
enforced on the
turbocharge our
world
defense industrial
by American
capacity
weapons of
in
war,
the next 5 years.
not the peace
And
of
at
the
the heart of
grave
this must
or the
be
security
one
of the
simple
slave.
principle. Europe
I am
must
talking
spend
about
more,
genuine peace,
Europe must spend better,
the kind of peace that
and Europe
makes life
must
on
spend
earth
European.
worth living,
and this will help
the
us
kind
fill
that
the
enables men and
urgent
nations
need
to grow
rebuild,
and to hope
replenish, and modernize
and build a better life
member
for their
states'
children.
armed forces.
Not
Europe
merely
should
peace for
strive to
Americans,
develop and manufacture the
but
next
peace for all men and
generation
women,
of battle-winning
not merely
operational
peace in our time,
capabilities. And my friends,
peace in all time.
the EPP
I speak
is
of peace
the party
because of the new face
that
of
has
war.
championed a Europe
Total war
that
makes
can
no
defend
sense
itself.
in an
And we
age
will
where
be the
great
party
powers
that
can
delivers on a
maintain
defense
large
union, and this topic needs
and relatively
undivided
invulnerable
attention.
nuclear
And therefore,
forces
we need a
and refuse to
designated
surrender
defense commissioner for the
without
next
resort to those
mandate
forces.
to serve our
It
Europe.
makes no sense in
Let's
an
fight
age
for Europe.
where a single
Long
nuclear
live
weapon
Europe. Thank you.
contains almost 10 times the explosive force delivered by all the Allied air forces in the Second World War. It makes no sense in an age when the deadly poisons produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the globe and to generations yet unborn. Today, the expenditure of billions of dollars every year on weapons acquired for the purpose of making sure we never need them is essential to the keeping of peace. But surely the acquisition of such idle stockpiles, which can only destroy and never create, is not the only, much less the most efficient, means of assuring peace. I speak of peace, therefore, as the necessary, rational end of rational men. I realize the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, and frequently the words of the pursuers fall on deaf ears, but we have no more urgent task. Some say that it is useless to speak of peace, or world law, or world disarmament, and that it will be useless until the leaders of the Soviet Union adopt a more enlightened attitude. I hope they do. I believe we can help them do it. First, examine our attitude towards peace itself. Too many of us think it is impossible. Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man, and man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable, and we believe they can do it again. And second, let us re-examine our attitude towards the Soviet Union. It is discouraging to think that their leaders may actually believe what their propagandists write. It is discouraging to read a recent authoritative Soviet text on military strategy and find on page after page wholly baseless and incredible claims, such as the allegation that American imperialist circles are preparing to unleash different types of war, that there is a very real threat of a preventative war being unleashed by American imperialists against the Soviet Union, and that the political aims, and I quote, of the American imperialists are to enslave economically and politically the European and other capitalist countries and to achieve world domination by means of aggressive war, unquote. Yet it is sad to read these Soviet statements, to realize the extent of the gulf between us. But it is also a warning to the American people not to fall into the same trap as the Soviets, not to see only a distorted and desperate view of the other side, not to see conflict as inevitable, accommodation as impossible, and communication as nothing more than an exchange of threats. No government or social system is so evil that its people must be considered as lacking in virtue. As Americans, we find communism profoundly repugnant as a negation of personal freedom and dignity. But we can still hail the Russian people for their many achievements in science, in space, in economic and industrial growth, in culture, in acts of courage. Among the many traits the peoples of our two countries have in common, none is stronger than our mutual abhorrence of war. Almost unique among the major world powers, we have never been at war with each other. And no nation in the history of battle ever suffered more than the Soviet Union in the Second World War. At least 20 million lost their lives. Countless millions of homes and families were burned or sacked. A third of the nation's territory, including 2/3 of its industrial base, was turned into a wasteland. A loss equivalent to the destruction of this country east of Chicago. Today, should total war ever break out again, no matter how, our two countries will be the primary target.
In the next 5 years.
It is an ironic but
this
accurate fact
must be one
that the two
single
strongest
principle.
powers
Europe must
are the
spend
two in the
more,
most danger of
Europe
devastation.
must spend better,
All we
and
have
Europe
built,
must spend European.
all we have worked
And this will help
will be
us
destroyed
to
in the first
replenish
24 hours.
to rebuild,
Massive sums of
replenish,
money
and
to weapons
modernize member
that could
states'
be better
armed
devoted
forces.
to
Europe
combat
should strive
ignorance,
to develop and
poverty,
manufacture
and
the
disease.
next generation.
America's weapons are non-provocative,
capabilities.
carefully controlled, designed to deter, and capable of selective use. Our military forces are committed to peace and disciplined in self-restraint. Our diplomats are instructed to avoid unnecessary irritants and purely rhetorical hostility, for we can seek a relaxation of tensions without relaxing our guard. And for our part, we do not need to use threats to prove we are resolute. We do not need to jam foreign broadcasts out of fear our faith will be eroded. We are unwilling to impose our system on any unwilling people, but we are willing and able to engage in peaceful competition with any people on earth. The United States, as the world knows, will never start a war. We do not want a war. We do not now expect a war. This generation of Americans has already had enough, more than enough, of war and hate and oppression. We shall be prepared if others wish it. We shall be alert to try to stop it. But we shall also do our part to build a world of peace where the weak are safe and the strong are just. We are not helpless before that task, but hopeless of its success. Confident and unafraid, we must labor on, not towards a strategy of annihilation, but towards a strategy of peace.
The deaths of the world's greatest figures, Sophie Scholl and John F. Kennedy, have undoubtedly been humanity's greatest losses, and fools like Lyndon B. Johnson, George W. Bush, Ursula von der Leyen and the White King of the Coalition and Little Bit Waco Sawley the Two-Face Niinisto have been wedged into the leadership of the state who have doctorates on deliberate misinterpretations of statistics and ethnic cleansing. Ursula von der Leyen, who is clearly a representative and supporter of the pure white race, thanks to her pure white surname, which Nazi Hitler could even pay to get it. Ursula von der Leyen, who is clearly Germany's new Minister of Propaganda and a happier version of Joseph Goebbels, who is driving the people of the earth to war with each other, and like all the previous idiots of her kind on this planet, Ursula von der Leyen will also drink tea when she watch these massacres on TV. How the people of this planet fight wars started by she and her allies. Ursula von der Leyen and Sorley, the two-faced neonisto who both like the smell of blood and gunpowder in the morning, and how the money flows aimed in the name of this Ukraine war goes to their own bank accounts on tax havens companies, is for sure worth starting these wars where you don't have to be on the war fronts to fight and die. Ursula von der Leyen, who is the new arrival of Nazi propaganda, which she cleverly does with feminism's self-pity and self-accusations, which would seem to sink the people in your own propaganda media. The feminism of the 21st century, whose pity points are used by women to drive a medieval witch hunt into this planet once again, which is done under the guise of medically non-existent and imaginary diseases of medical psychiatry. National cleansing of 21st century that is carried out with the help of these imaginary diseases by medicating all problem citizens unprofitable to the state with the drugs used in cancer treatment, which are fed into autumn depression, is for sure something that Nazi Germany did not have time enough to carry out in all their hurry.